Modern NASCAR drivers do not respect each other. Okay, that's just about what you should expect a NASCAR YouTuber to say. It's a cliche. However, let's take a deep dive into this issue. Why are some of the most accomplished, most accredited drivers racing their competition aggressively and even foul-mouthing their colleagues?
I've tried to talk to guys, they don't listen, so I've lost interest in talking to them.
I don't like racing like that, but you have to race like that, and that's by the end of the race, everybody's in the slam or B-slam category, so it's a tough situation.
NRF Productions presents Why Modern NASCAR Drivers Lack Respect. Today, some NASCAR fan that just got out of the state penitentiary after a 15-year sentence would feel like they're in a complete different universe. The NASCAR they once knew is almost unrecognizable, like Joan Rivers after her 5 plastic surgeries. What's up with the new number placement? Why is the Bristol Motor Speedway covered in dirt? Why are the grandstands either empty, tarped off, torn down, or enhanced with drink rails? And most importantly, what happened to the superstars I know and love? The 2008 Chase field consisted of 12 drivers, and as for today, only Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin continue to race stock cars as a full-time gig. The 2023 NASCAR Cup Series has a completely different cast than in 1998 or even 2013. In this next generation era, you'll see the winningest drivers aren't Gordon, Johnson, and Stewart, but instead Elliott, Chase Elliott, Larson, and Bell. One other thing to note is that these superstars are increasingly younger, probably to the delight of the Fox cameraman. These are not the times where you would grind your way through late models and the Busch Series just to get to the NASCAR Cup Series and finally make your rookie season starts at age 30. The new modern NASCAR trajectory for drivers is to start racing trucks the minute you turn 18, race Xfinity a year or two later to hopefully prove that you have the capabilities of being a NASCAR Cup Series driver. For a majority of the winningest drivers in this next generation era, their Cup Series rookie season was in their early to mid-20s. Such a culture shock proves Cars 3 predicted the future. We now have a NASCAR Cup Series garage where over 2/3 of the current full-time drivers are under the age of 35. That's concerning when you look at NASCAR history. On average, a driver really doesn't perform at their peak, at their best, until they hit the age of 38. It's a time where physically, yeah, the driver might not be as in shape as he was in his 20s. However, the smarts of racing 10 to 15 years really compensates for that, making for a better, well-rounded driver not only for NASCAR but also the competitors around him. So with a majority of the drivers starting out young and coming into NASCAR younger, you now have a large crop of drivers that just don't have the smarts that a veteran has. These veteran drivers are increasingly moving up retirement to now their early to mid 40s, bucking the trend of taking the Mark Martin route of slowly scaling back their time and days at the racetrack, replacing those Sundays competing in the heart of battle to instead go on a nice Sunday drive in the countryside with their Chevy Sevelle sipping on some sweet tea. Before, at least in Mark Martin's case, Rick Hendrick comes up to him and just casually brings up the idea to Mark of delaying retirement again to race full-time competitively into his 50s. And this early window of retirement means the sudden loss of beliefs, values, and traditions that really were instilled into these drivers by some of NASCAR's all-time greats. Getting flipped off by Dale Earnhardt on the biggest stage is a badge of honor Kurt Busch will wear for the rest of his life. His abrupt retirement officially removed the last driver from the grid that had raced against the great Dale Earnhardt. Another legend, my idol, Jeff Gordon. I remember it like it was yesterday. My mom told me after I had just gotten out of middle school that after 2015, Jeff Gordon was going to retire. Jeff Gordon hung up his helmet nearly 7 years ago for the final time. Still, today, only 19 of the 34 full-time drivers have ever raced against NASCAR's current Ironman. Even more radical is the fact that just 8 active drivers raced against Gordon full-time for at least 3 or more seasons. The modern youth movement has either driven out fan favorites completely or has pressured current veterans in their early 40s to start thinking about retirement. Still, I want to emphasize this. It is unfair to solely point the blame at these younger drivers because these fresh, clean-shaven faces have been forced into situations and circumstances that past generations never had to adapt to. NASCAR today is currently in the phase that I like to coin the entertainment era. I mean, I'm sure you guys have all seen this phrase typed out by a NASCAR fan on Facebook or Twitter. NASCAR is becoming the WWE on wheels. Now maybe that's always been the case. The France family has had always a one-size-fits-all policy when it comes to driver conduct.
Always have at it and have a good time.
However, in recent years, the coats and ties in Daytona Beach and Charlotte have completely shifted their target audience. NASCAR needs younger fans. I don't exaggerate when I say this. The average NASCAR fan has 2 things: an AARP subscription and spends his spare time going to bingo night. Sure, this fan has been a dedicated NASCAR fan for 30 years. Unfortunately, he's already lived out most of his NASCAR dreams. He's been to Daytona, Sonoma, and everywhere in between. I'm telling you this, guys, right now. In the next 30 to 50 years, NASCAR is going to have a crisis if they cannot find new fans because, unfortunately, those baby boomers that really made NASCAR what it is, unfortunately, they're not going to be with us. It's a harsh truth about life. So how on earth do you convince young millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha to love NASCAR? Because you might be better off convincing a goldfish to become a NASCAR fan. Most of them would be more fitted to watch a 3-hour NASCAR race than their human counterparts. Still, NASCAR is trying. They're trying hard to delay complete irrelevancy. They have one core strategy as a sports governing body to try to spike interest in this 18 to 49 demographic. Traditionally, NASCAR races would be run uninterrupted outside of necessary cautions. Stage racing changed that, where there would be 2 guaranteed competition cautions every race to bunch up the field to create tight-knit racing and a more entertaining product. Traditionally, the race cars wouldn't feature restrictor plates at intermediate tracks and have a spoiler the size of the border wall. The 550 package changed that, where NASCAR's end goal was to bunch up the field, create tight-knit racing, and a more entertaining product. Traditionally, NASCAR made frequent stops at the same cookie-cutter tracks every single year. The addition of tracks not built for NASCAR changed that, moving the Brickyard 400 to the road course at Indianapolis and adding COTA created a lot more chaotic racing due to the track's configuration and mainly its narrow 90-degree passing zone. NASCAR did this to bunch up the field, create more tight-knit racing, and a more entertaining product. However, the poster child of this entertainment era is New Atlanta. The old surface was a cheese grater to the tires, which produced the fall-off necessary to make it a compelling driver's racetrack. But like all surfaces, it would need a new coat of asphalt before the wear and tear really made this track unraceable. SMI would go a completely different route with the repave, elevating the banking, NASCAR in response reducing the horsepower, and once a unique track with character became a mini super speedway too, I think you get the point by now. More people have went through the turnstiles, and Marcus Smith has really defended this configuration by some criticism, mainly by the drivers. He said this as the drivers were extremely vocal. They felt like they were being entertainers rather than tough competitors. So you can tell NASCAR and SMI, they put these drivers into chaotic, tight-knit situations to try to make the company flashier to younger fans. They did all of this just to drop lower in the TV ratings than a woman wearing apple-bottom jeans. Meanwhile, I find it ironic that less gimmicky sports like MLS and Formula One continue to grow their US fan bases by actually doing their homework, really studying up on what the younger generation expects of them, namely where the younger demographic consumes media, entertainment, etc., and meeting their demands on those platforms. There's just something about NASCAR today that reduces the driver to the entertainer rather than a brave competitor, which perhaps bravery might seem like an afterthought in terms of NASCAR, considering another major changing of a motorsport norm. As the late Bill French Jr. stated, when you sign on to be a competitor, you also sign on to the risk. This also pertains to spectators, as there's no shortage of stories about fans getting their jaw broken, being hit with an avalanche of car parts, or an 8-year-old boy getting killed by a tire that went rogue. Every single time the drivers strap into their cars, they are the ones that take on, they assume the most risk, including Dale Earnhardt. The 7-time champion had himself a wife, a successful son, tons of friends, fans, and millions of people that padded his 8-figure bank account. He would lose all of that and his own life on the final lap, final corner of the 2001 Daytona 500. Even as this was NASCAR's biggest tragedy, he did not die for nothing. The people at NASCAR did their homework to reduce the driver's risk of injury and/or fatality. For a motorsports league, it is impressive for NASCAR to say this, that they've went 22 consecutive years and counting without a fatality in a Cup, Xfinity, or Truck Series event. That is still astounding to this day, because it is a trend that bucks the trend of driver or spectator fatalities as a harsh annual reality of auto racing. So what happens when you're a NASCAR driver in an era where you haven't had to see one of your colleagues die on the racetrack? All the safer barriers, Hans devices, and blue foam allows drivers to walk away unscathed, even when flying into the catch fence. That is the luxury most of the younger drivers have. Look, if you're 25 or younger, myself included, you have never witnessed a live fatality in NASCAR. I know that is awfully hard to say. Personally, I don't remember a thing about Dale Earnhardt's death, but fortunately I was humbled and reminded of the realities of auto racing with the unfortunate death of Dan Weldon. In fact, 11-year-old me had a hard time sleeping that night because of it. That's awfully concerning, because now you have a younger generation that might be blinded by the true dangers of motorsport. Plus, going back to the changing of the guard, older drivers have more to lose than younger drivers. If, say, Ty Gibbs dies in a wreck, yeah, it would be tragic for the Gibbs family. The emotional impact would be just as strong as a veteran due to all the potential never fulfilled, like Kenny Irwin Jr. and Adam Petty, who we unfortunately lost in 2000. The thing that sets a younger driver like Ty Gibbs apart from a veteran driver is that younger driver oftentimes doesn't have someone depending on him. For example, if drivers like Kevin Harvick or Kyle Busch were to die on the racetrack, they leave behind their loving wives and hardworking people that depend on businesses like KHI Management, Kyle Busch Motorsports, and Rowdy Energy to maintain their lives. This would be second, of course, to the impact it would have on their young children that are still learning the ropes of life and racing. When Dale Earnhardt Jr. lost his dad, he was thrust into a world of uncertainty. The plans at DEI shifted drastically after Dale Sr.'s death. Add that in to the major loss of guidance and discipline that is needed to become a NASCAR champion now that he didn't have his dad to help mentor him. For the success he managed to have, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s life and career has way too many what-ifs attached to it because of his father's death. That might explain why, at Richmond, Kevin Harvick cut Martin Truex Jr. a little bit of slack rather than just running him over. That not just because this might actually put himself at risk for injury since he is creeping up in age, but also the fact that he has his son Keelan looking up to him, watching every move. It would be rather hypocritical of him to instill his son with the values of racing clean while sending Martin Truex Jr. into the inside wall for slowing him up. You would hope that eventually most drivers would become more emotionally mature. However, if you want a current fix, I hate to say it guys, but we might have to go back to the 1970s. The NASCAR Cup Series product could benefit greatly by just re-adding an element of danger. Look no further than last fall and the storyline coming out of the Texas playoff race. Outside of course, Goodyear's failure to bring a competent racing tire, again, the main talking point was the safety of the next generation car with Alex Bowman's concussion. So is it just a coincidence that the next week's race at Talladega was one of the tamest in years for that track? If history is any indication, the riskier the situation, the more likely the drivers are going to race more conservative and more with respect. Now, before we officially make the return to guardrails and neck-high catch fences at these racetracks, we must first tie this all back to the modern day. Our modern society has been revolutionized by the implementation of technology. Many would consider this to be the information era. Platforms like YouTube gives the everyday person new access to information that really resonates with their values more than traditional media. However, the negative impacts on this are increased polarization and a lack of trust, especially among my generation. According to Pew Research, 71% of people aged 18 to 29 say that most people will try to take advantage of you if they get the chance. Meanwhile, only 62% of people 30 to 49 believe that same thing is true. In addition, 60% of people 18 to 29 say that most people cannot be trusted. That research has a strong correlation to modern NASCAR. There are some exceptions, like Denny Hamlin intentionally wrecking Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin spinning JJ Yeley. Now maybe this really is just a Denny Hamlin problem, because most of the bonehead moves, it seems like, and the instances of running over drivers are done by the ones that are aged 18 to 29. But why are NASCAR drivers feeling this way? Perhaps you just look at the modern day, as people tend to have a lot less friends according to research, with many people reporting 0 to 1 close friends. Something I suppose I can sympathize with, considering that I am probably the Ross Chastain of NASCAR YouTubers. In terms of the NASCAR side, back in the day, many of the drivers were good friends with each other. They'd often spend their time away from the track bar hopping, playing golf, sightseeing, as well as other activities that made them really respect each other more on the racetrack. Today, the drivers have a various amount of options to entertain themselves while at the racetrack. They can choose to stream their favorite shows on Disney+, which at this point, guys, Disney+ is pretty much a nostalgia factory, let's be honest here. They have social media to watch NASCAR videos like this one. They can watch this video anytime that they desire, instead of having to tape record NASCAR Race Hub. As for a rainy day, video games in the motorhome seems more logical than calling up a racing buddy to go to the Dave & Buster's a half hour away from the track. This way of modern living seems to echo in the NASCAR garage, and the thing is that it really isn't natural. As humans, we are really supposed to interact with one another. However, these drivers are mostly showing up to their job, not trying to make friends. These drivers pretty much strap in, get the best results for themselves and their team, do their media obligations, and then take the first flight back to North Carolina without acknowledging competitors or confronting conflict. Case in point, Christopher Bell was awfully blunt last weekend in calling Ross Chastain the bonsai and the wrecking ball, even though Ross Chastain never touched him. Fortunately, guys, C. Bell would own up to his mistake on Twitter to William Byron, not the guy he called the wrecking ball or the bonsai, the guy he called out. And in fact, he never actually talked face to face with Ross Chastain.
He can say what he wants, like other guys. He walks right by me and doesn't say anything to me.
Hate on Ross Chastain all you want, sure, but what you have to admit about Ross Chastain is that he is the least hypocritical driver in the garage right now. He races aggressive, owns up to it, and confronts drivers when he feels like he has done wrong. For instance, when Denny Hamlin took him out at Phoenix for nothing he did in that race in particular. Can you really say that exact same thing about Hamlin or Logano or Suarez or Byron or Christopher Bell or Bubba Wallace? So there are realistically a couple of ways to tackling this industry-wide issue. Maybe it's the veteran drivers that raced against the likes of Mark Martin, Tony Stewart, and Bobby Labonte, organizing a drivers meeting like Rusty Wallace did in 1994 to really address the room, address all the drivers at once, and sit there and say, right now, the NASCAR Cup Series is all balls and no brains. Maybe it's NASCAR stepping in more like they did at New Hampshire in 2001 when Jeff Gordon showed his displeasure with Robbie Gordon. As Kyle Busch said, with the next generation car, it might teach these drivers a lesson if they're held a lap or they're sent to the back, where with this car in particular, when you get in the back of the pack, it is awfully hard to pass since everyone is mostly running the same lap times. Speaking of the next generation car, NASCAR can get rid of the composite body. The composite body overall, it has been a net negative. The only positives have really been Ross Chastain's hail melon and the cost it has saved for teams. However, you get rid of the composite body and you're going to have more drivers protecting their equipment rather than the slam or be slammed mentality that Kevin Harvick has coined. Or if all else fails, in a couple of years, guys, AI, robots are going to come for all of our jobs. And that might eventually include NASCAR, especially if an AI robot can sit there and drive a NASCAR with more etiquette than their human counterparts. If human NASCAR drivers can't step up, the robots will take Chase Elliott's job like they'll probably take yours in another year or two. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some other full tank NASCAR content that this channel has to offer. Other than that, this is Nathan for NRF Productions, Life's a Beach, and then you drive.